So we'll get started. Good morning. Warm welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Kelsey Winter. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre and the Chair of the Board of the newly announced Wildfire Resilience Consortium of Canada. Super pleased to be here with all of you today and lucky enough to be your MC. I would like to start by acknowledging that the land that we're meeting on today is Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. So that's the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, Îyârhe, Nakota Nation, and the Métis Nation, Region 3. I'm visiting from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, which are today represented by the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. So just wanted to take an intentional moment to honor, recognize, and respect the Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land that we're meeting on to work today and going home to at the end of the event. So it's not every day that we get to see a room like this. Researchers and policymakers, program managers, subject matter experts, community leaders, and allies from almost every corner of Canada, and we're together for a shared purpose. So today we're here because we know that advancing wildfire resiliency in Canada, it takes more than one discipline and one organization or a jurisdiction. It takes exactly what we have in this room and joining us online. A diverse, committed network bridging science and policy and lived experience together to protect our communities. So to me, this announcement is more than an investment. It's a vote of confidence in what happens when we collaborate across boundaries, and proof that with our expertise and our resources and our passion, which I know everybody in this room brings, we can build a more resilient Canada for generations to come. So I will challenge each of you today in this room and joining us online to talk to someone that you haven't talked to before and share your work, and let's build some of those bridges that fire can't burn. And without further ado, let's get to the matter at hand. So please join me in welcoming Corey Hogan, Parliamentary Secretary, to the Honourable Tim Hodgson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, to the mic.
So thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. We're here in the Senate room at the University of Calgary. I was a senator at the University of Calgary until 4 months ago. We never met in this room. This is entirely an honorific, I think, the room here. But it's great to be here, great to see what the Senate room looks like as a former senator. I am proud to be here today on behalf of Tim Hodgson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Just 2 years ago, Canadians experienced the most destructive wildfire season in our country's history, with over 6,600 wildfires burning over 14 million hectares of land, 4 times the 10-year average. And I don't have to tell my fellow Albertans that 2024 was also a challenging year, with over 5,000 wildfires in total and more than 5.3 million hectares burned. We saw devastating images coming out of Jasper, with thousands evacuated and insurance damages topping $8.5 billion. This year is no exception. Forest fires continue to rage across the west and now east, forcing people from homes and choking cities across the continent in smoke. My heart goes out to all those affected, and I am thinking for sure today about the people in Newfoundland who are seeing their homes under threat. Le feu de forêt gagne en fréquence et en intensité partout au pays, notamment en raison des effets croissants des changements climatiques. Notably, this is happening because of climate change. Wildfires also pose major economic challenge for Canada. By 2040, Natural Resources Canada estimates that fire suppression costs alone could double as Canada tackles worsening wildfire risk. Nous devons nous assurer que le Canada est prêt et bien outillé pour affronter le feu de forêt de cette année et ceux à venir. Ce qui peut se faire en renforçant notre résilience, en protégeant notre environnement, et en stimulant notre économie. Which brings me to why I'm here today. I am pleased to announce $45.7 million in funding for 30 projects through Natural Resources Canada's Build and Mobilize Foundational Wildland Fire Knowledge Program. That includes $3.9 million for 10 Indigenous-led projects through the Supporting and Mobilizing Indigenous Fire Knowledge Grant, which will enhance the vital role Indigenous communities play in fire stewardship and building wildfire resilience. Especially important because Indigenous peoples are disproportionately impacted by wildfires. These investments will play an instrumental role in helping us understand how we can reduce the impact of wildfires on Canadians by accelerating how we develop and adopt innovative and adaptive wildfire and forestry practices. On that note, I want to highlight a couple of projects in Alberta that are getting funding through this announcement. First, there's over $890,000 for a Swan River First Nation project that will test and refine a wildfire risk assessment and scenario exploration tool to evaluate and incorporate wildfire risk into land management policies, consultation, and planning processes. This tool will also help forecast present and future wildfire risk for any landscape in Canada. I'd also like to highlight the Blood Tribe Fire Guardianship Program, which is receiving $500,000 to foster community knowledge sharing, build capacity, and develop new tools, resources, and cultural practices to revitalize Indigenous fire stewardship and traditional fire practices within the First Nation and across southern Alberta. Through a Fire Guardian network comprised of Indigenous youth and community members, the Blood Tribe will integrate cultural burning, habitat restoration, and intergenerational knowledge transfer in their community's wildfire and land management practices. Most importantly, I want to impress that today's announcement is about ensuring that communities, emergency responders, and decision makers have the knowledge they need to prevent, prepare for, and respond to wildfires here in Alberta and across the country. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Parliamentary Secretary Hogan. Now I will ask Joe Desjardins, Director of Research for the BC Métis Federation, who is joining us virtually, to say a few words.
We have a community-based approach to research, and we're building on existing research relationships. We currently have researchers in Clearwater, Fort Nelson, and Terrace, and other regions are certainly impacted by the fires across British Columbia. We know from our prior research that Métis have a long history in BC. They emerged out of Eastern Métis migration, but also we're learning they emerged independently within the entire Pacific Northwest and what became BC. We work to recover these stories and these lived experiences. And the exciting part is our approach is different because we are building strong relationships with local people. We're training them to do wildfire research, to recover their own knowledge for their own benefit, to give them a voice. The history of the Pacific Northwest is quite different when it's told through a Métis, local Métis perspective. This is exciting because it changes how Métis communities are understood. We know that to enhance resilience, that it is important to establish a baseline, a knowledge framework, a uniquely BC Métis response to wildfire issues. So we're reviewing existing literature, we're doing targeted archival research, how they interacted with fire, how Métis people interacted with fire, and how wildfire has impacted these people and communities. And already interesting stories are coming out. You know, to conclude, I think of those Métis people I know. We've had members who've had their lives and business disrupted, people who lost their homes, lost everything. I went to Fort Nelson and I drove through a wildfire zone and I have to have a mask on in the vehicle. It was a really scary experience. You know, these folks need a voice, an informed historical voice to inform future work, to learn. So to learn more about our research, go to métisinbc.ca, and I want to thank everybody for taking the time today.
Wait till the screen goes up, or we're going to leave it down? Yes. Leave it down? Wait? Do it a couple more times. Lights on, lights on. Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Now I would like to introduce Percy Guichon, CEO of the Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation Ltd.
Banaras, good morning. My name is Percy Guichon. I'm the CEO for Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation, also known as CCR. As you're all aware, in the last few years, wildfires have greatly impacted our forests and communities throughout Canada. In 2017, the Plateau and Hansville wildfires burned 800,000 hectares in the Central Chilcotin Traditional Territory, located west of Williams Lake in the interior of BC. And we're still trying to recover from the devastation left behind. So on behalf of CCR, a joint venture forestry company owned by 3 Central Chilcotin communities, Tsailal First Nation, Atlantico Government, and Unasitin Government, we want to thank Natural Resource Canada for their continued support and commitment to assist in our wildfire recovery efforts. This funding will help protect our remote First Nation communities by mitigating future wildfire risk. CCR is also committed to Indigenous-led stewardship, environmental resilience, and community well-being. Through innovative forest rehabilitation practices, CCR is transforming areas post-wildfire into opportunities to restore ecosystems and recover fiber and build economic and environmental security for Central Chilcotin people. This investment from Natural Resource Canada will help ensure that future generations inherit a healthier, more balanced, and resilient forest that reduce wildfire risk and protect our communities. So, Chanaya, thank you.
Thank you, Percy. Oh, you're taller than me, but I think Jim is too. I'll now introduce Jim Herbers, Executive Director of the Biodiversity Pathways.
Thank you for the introduction, Kelsey. Move this just a little bit. As we know, wildfires in Canada are becoming more intense, they're becoming larger, they're becoming more frequent. And they pose serious risks to our forests, our wildlife, and perhaps most importantly, or actually most importantly, to our communities. Through the Wildland Foundations project and funded by NRCan, Natural Resources Canada, we're working with Indigenous partners to better understand the impacts of extreme wildfires and how Indigenous fire practices can help restore landscapes and reduce the risk of these events occurring in the future. This work is happening at 4 demonstration sites across Western Canada and in partnership with 4 Indigenous communities. The first, Fort Smith Métis Council, is located in the southern part of Northwest Territories along the Slave River. The second is the foothills of Ojibwe First Nations, located in Alberta's lower foothills. The third is the Lakeland Métis Nation Association, located in Alberta's northeastern boreal forests. And the fourth, Yakitak Nucleate First Nation, is in the Galton Range, located in southeastern British Columbia. Now, unfortunately, 3 of these communities have been directly impacted or affected by extreme fires in the last number of years. As Mr. Hogan has mentioned, it's been a tough road for a lot of the communities here in Western Canada and increasingly across Canada. At the demonstration sites here, we're bringing together Indigenous knowledge and Western science to better understand fire impacts on local communities and identify effective restoration opportunities in those communities. The 4th site has not yet burned, but faces high wildfire risk after a century without natural or cultural burning practices. Together with our partner, Yakitak Nucleate First Nation, we're developing and testing management practices to restore culturally important wildlife habitat and reduce fuel loads in the forests. Guided by local Indigenous priorities, our Wildland Foundations project is delighted to be a part of Natural Resource Canada's national network for advancing wildfire resilience. We hope that these demonstration sites will serve as a living example of how co-created knowledge can guide future fire mitigation and forest restoration across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herbers. So I'd like to introduce the next speaker, William Nikolakis, Executive Director of the Gathering Voices Society, and he will also be joining us virtually. William, is your mic on? We can't hear you. No. He looks unmuted. Can't hear you, sorry. Oh, you can hear on Zoom, so it's in the room, maybe?
He's open on my channel.
Just one second, William, we're just figuring it out.
Is his mic open on Zoom?
Is your mic open on Zoom? Zoom is fine.
We're sending audio out online and into the room in the same fashion, so I'm not sure why we wouldn't be able to.
Okay.
I've made no changes, like it's been open.
Do you want him to proceed then?
Well, the media will still get it, you know, yeah, because they're gonna go use the link anyway. We'll see if we can get it going, but yeah, I guess you could proceed and then everybody's gonna get it anyway. We're able to film what's live anyway.
Okay, Mr. Nikolakis, if you can go ahead and give your presentation, and those online will be able to hear you, and so will the media, and then we'll share it with those in the room. You can mime as you go too, if that's helpful. All right, thank you, Mr. Nikolakis, and apologies for those technical difficulties. Once again, thank you to all the speakers for choosing to spend time with us today, and for everyone who elevated the importance of this announcement by joining in person and joining us online. On behalf of the WRCC, the consortium, we're so excited to see the positive impact that all the great work that comes from these projects will yield. And we'll now open it up for questions from the media. So welcome to Austin Morris in the back there, who will be moderating the media availability.
Hello. We will now open the floor to media questions. If you would please step to the mic on my right-hand side along the window if you have a question. You will be given one question and one follow-up. If you'd like to direct your question to a particular speaker, please state the speaker's name in your question.
Yeah, so before I was an elected official, I was a senior official for the government of Alberta. And so I'm quite mindful that when you're dealing with a provincial emergency, you often have sources of information and pressures that are, not always as easily understood by people from different points of view. So I want to be very careful and very mindful of the jurisdiction, right? And they made their decisions because they thought they were the right decisions to make. I have no doubt about that. But I think it does underline the urgency of this moment and the severity of this time we find ourselves in terms of wildfires. It's as dry as it's ever been on the East Coast right now. That is creating an enormous amount of risk. And whether you agree with the actions or not, I think the fact they felt they need to make them really underlines exactly how serious things are right now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
On the other side of the border, there's also Republican legislative that are saying Canada should do something about their fires because they're affected by smoke. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no people that want to do more about wildfires than Canadians. We are being affected every day in very severe ways. We've seen this in the smoke that clogs our cities. We've seen this in our communities that are evacuated. There are communities under evacuation right now. This is certainly something that we all need to deal with. But I think this also underlines the international challenges that are brought on by climate change. The consequences do not rest in one jurisdiction, which is why we need to globally tackle this problem. And it's going to require the work of people across the globe to make the world safer again.
Hi, Minister Acton Clarkin with CBC. This question's for you. So some of the projects on this list, like the Blood Tribe one, for example, that one, just as an example, has already been announced back in March. So I just want a point of clarity. How much, if any, of this money that you're talking about today is brand new, like the first time it's been announced?
First time announced. Okay, well, I would have to confirm exactly with the department on that. I would say it's all part of an envelope that is previously announced. So we're announcing additional projects at this point, and in particular within one of the streams, which is something we'll get some clarity for you on from department officials.
Hi, Bill Graveland from Canadian Press.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I was wondering, the announcement today, how quickly any of this will bear results to prevent wildfires?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Bill. It's going to depend. So there are a couple of different streams of activity here. One of the streams is about assessment and trying to understand where risk is and therefore where we should put resources. One of them is about how we respond to these particular moments. And some of that work will bear fruit near immediately. It'll allow us to allocate resources more appropriately as we move forward. It also means we're going to be able to make use of Indigenous knowledge in a way that we haven't previously been able to do. But we're going to be building on knowledge. I mean, one of the reasons we're doing this is to grow a body of knowledge, and inherently that means there's going to be a bit of a ramp up as we expand the amount we know and the amount we're able to do. So there will be some short-term benefits, but it will be really longer-term that you'll see the most significant benefits.
The announcement it's sort of vague, and I'm wondering if you could give us one or two concrete examples.
Right, okay, well, sure. We can talk about, I'm trying to think of one that we can really latch onto here. I think with this particular announcement, what you're seeing is that we're investing in the capacity building, particularly with Indigenous communities, who are the most affected by wildfires, to use the knowledge that's historically existed within Indigenous communities in order to resist wildfires and in order to be able to see them coming and in order to make sure that we're doing what we can to mitigate against them. Things like controlled burns, for example, that have been used for hundreds of years by Indigenous communities, but are really being better understood by non-Indigenous communities really only in the past couple of decades. Making use of that and then taking that knowledge and applying it across the board. So this is about building a body of knowledge for everybody and applying that knowledge specifically to resist wildfires in those communities most impacted.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Ray and I'm from City News.
Hi there.
With your background and role in natural resources, I do have to ask you a question about the tariffs from China on canola. So what will the Liberal government's response be to this?
On the tariffs on canola?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that that's probably a question best directed towards the Minister of Trade. as well, it certainly affects natural resources. In certain contexts, this is more of an agriculture question and a trade question.
Is there anything that you guys will have a response to with the farmers and supporting them?
Again, I think that's better directed towards agriculture and towards trade.
Thank you.
I'm Felix for Felix Garnier, Radio Canada. I would like to know, since like BC receive a lot of money, Quebec too, but Alberta a bit less, how did you attribute the money by provinces?
Well, so there's a granting process, and people put forward applications, and based on those applications and based on whether they meet the needs of the project, that's how those decisions are made. Certainly, you know, attempts are made to make sure that it's distributed evenly, but it has to be distributed in a way that makes sense. And I think there's no denying that there are certain hotspots right now, and there's also areas where less money can do just as much. And so one of the roles that we have to do at Natural Resources Canada is decide how to spend that money in a way that is both equitable and creates the most bang for buck, because we want to be good stewards of public dollars.
Hi, Noah Brennan from the Calgary Herald.
Good to see you, Noah.
Nice to see you. I just have a general question. As far as the overall federal government priorities, where does the wildfire prevention and mitigation stand as far as the in the ranking maybe of government priorities?
Yeah, I mean, we don't generally just rank government priorities. We get into a lot of fights, I think, around caucus and cabinet. But I'll tell you, everybody is seized with wildfires right now. I think rightly so. We're seeing the consequences. We're seeing the expanded consequences over years. I often talk about in Calgary, the average number of smoke hours, so hours where wildfire smoke is clogging out the city, was 10 between about 1970 and 2014. It's now in the hundreds. It's not your imagination. We're seeing more of this, and that is because the consequences are expanding so dramatically. There are economic consequences, there are health consequences, and there are psychological consequences to the expansion of wildfires. I did work for the government of Alberta when we were dealing with the consequences of Fort McMurray's big fire and Slave Lake as well. And I can tell you, sometimes those consequences come much further down the road after the moment of urgency has passed. And it's incumbent on governments across all levels to do what they can to both avoid these things happening in the first place and respond to them as rapidly as possible. So in terms of how important is this to this government, this is the first time there's been a parliamentary secretary who's dedicated towards forestry, and we work daily on this issue to make sure that we can do what we can to protect our country and protect the people within this country.
Seeing no others in the line, we will now hand it over to our moderator virtually.
Okay, we can't hear if people are talking. Live theater. Yeah. Yeah. I'll just answer what I imagine the questions are, you know? What I feel you're asking. Yeah. I mean, that's one way.
For media on the line, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat and we can send it over.
We hear you now.
Fact, amazing.
We might not hear anything else the rest of our lives.
Okay, I will resume my my instructions here. Once your hand is raised, you will receive a request from the host to unmute your device. If you're joining online, click accept to unmute. Once unmuted, please state your name and media affiliation before asking your questions. After you've asked your questions, your mic will be muted once again, and we will move to the next person. Pour poser une question durant le point de presse, vous n'avez qu'à lever votre main virtuellement dans la section réaction. Une fois votre main levée, l'animateur vous enverra une demande pour activer votre micro. Si vous êtes en ligne, cliquez sur accepter pour l'activer. Lorsque votre micro sera activé, vous voulez indiquer votre nom et l'organe de presse que vous représentez avant de poser votre question. En règle générale, les questions sont limitées à une question et une question supplémentaire par journaliste. We will now begin taking questions. Nous allons maintenant répondre aux questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Last call. Any questions on the line? It looks like there are no more questions, so this concludes the event. Thank you, everyone. Il semble qu'il n'y ait plus de questions. Ceci conclut notre événement. Merci à tous.